Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Talent Game podcast. This episode is going to be all about what it means to be a CRO. In this case, that's a Chief Revenue Officer, how to hire one, how to become one, really everything that you can think of about this position and what it means, even specifically within the games industry. So here with me we have Paul and Dan, all the way on the other side of the world, on the west coast of the US. But I'll leave it to you both to do your introduction. So starting with you, Paul, over to you.
Yeah, happy to be here, Joe. Thanks for inviting me. So I'm Paul. I lead revenue at Appcharge. Appcharge, we help game publishers sell directly to players on the web, essentially so they can keep more margin and run better offers in the app stores. So quick rundown on who I am and what we do.
Perfect, thanks. And Dan, how about you?
Hello. Hey. Yeah, I'm Dan, CRO at Gamesite. I've been in the games industry for about 20 years now in varying roles. Gamesite is a company that helps game publishers with various elements of their marketing. We have two kind of main areas. One is measurement, so attribution for PC and console games. And also we run a influencer data and services agency, so helping with go-to-market for publishers a lot of times around game launches.
Yeah, perfect. And yeah, the common theme for anyone listening already is that you're both on the B2B gaming tech side of things. So I'm sure we can go into those similarities in a moment. But first, the question I ask everybody is, what are you playing right now? I'll throw that over to Dan first.
Sure. Yeah, my gaming right now is largely driven by my 7-year-old son. So whatever he's playing, which at the moment is some classics like Rocket League and FIFA, which I love. So if it involves a ball and a goal, I'm definitely in. And then also some silly stuff like Forza. But then he's outpacing me on like ridiculous strategy process games like Satisfactory and anything where he can like build a base on Mars, and then it's like out of my league. He's already pulling past me.
Well, brilliant. As someone who is both ex EA and Epic, I mean the
Nice.
the FIFA or EAFC, as I say, and Rocket League choices are that's great. I love those. And how about you, Paul? What do you play right now?
Yeah, I used to be in console and I used to be into FIFA and Fortnite until relatively recently, but I think I've aged out of both those games. The PvP element of those games makes it, you have to really invest in those games to be good at them.
That's why you just play a 7-year-old.
Exactly. When you're online and playing FIFA and the matching isn't right, it's not fun. So I'm on Royal Match now, mainly because it's just low stress. You can play in short bursts and it's just, I don't feel like I'm losing every single time. There is a win there in there for me. So
I'm surprised at how often my kids want to steal my phone to play Royal Match. They
it's
really dug into it.
Yeah, and Royal Match still has no ads, right? I think that's a very
thing.
Yeah, it's exactly a key selling point. So you can just load up, get a few levels in and out again. And for me, I should probably tell you what I'm deciding to play. But it was just a few days ago, me and a friend, we were talking about our love for Metal Gear Solid. And so I was like, I noticed on the PlayStation Store, the very first one on the PS1 from 98, the remaster is on a discount. So for £10. So I picked that up, and I'm gonna relive some childhood memories with that one, I think, over the weekend. Great. So hey, we should probably talk about CRO stuff now, heading into it. So I would love to know what your definition is of the role first, because I'd imagine there'll be people listening that think, what is a CRO or Chief Revenue Officer anyway? So Paul, do you want to give us your take on that?
Yeah, I do think it does depend on the stage of the business. I think that can really change over time, but essentially how I see the CRO role is the connector between the reality of what's happening in the market and internal priorities. So I think one of the most important things for me in my career has been deciding what to say no to. because I've worked quite a bit at early founding companies, and founders love to say yes to everything. And I think it's the CRO's job to decide to say what to say no to, essentially. Building the narrative and making sure you're focused on those key initiatives. And then, as the company scales, hiring and coaching a team that can really go to market and take what you're building successfully. And then, as you scale up, working on things like pricing and packaging the solutions you're taking to market. And as you scale up even further, kind of forecasting, accountability, cross-functional alignment. But as I said, the role kind of changes over time. I think most importantly initially at those really early stages is really saying no to things and making sure the company is super focused and has some core growth trajectories in which it can really invest in and be successful in. Yeah, so that's kind of how I would define the role with a couple of you know roles and responsibilities basically.
Yeah. And how about you, Dan?
Yeah, so everything he said, for sure, and I think we'll probably dig into some of the more functional kind of things like cross-functional stuff and pricing and all that, which is definitely a big part of the job. But kind of at a high level, I like to think of it as, you know, we're the I get to run the team that is responsible for taking everything else that the company is doing and putting their sweat into, their deep thought, and we're the ones who deliver it to the world, right? We have to get it across the line from, you know, inside the house to outside of it, and that's a huge responsibility to kind of realize the vision, realize the work, of everybody else in the company that's been thinking and working and coding, whatever it is, and making sure that it gets its best shot at being adopted in the market. So that's kind of from a philosophical standpoint. I'd like to talk to the team about feeling a bit of a responsibility and a privilege to be that team for our company. And so obviously there's a ton of things that go into that, but at a kind of, it's easy to look at the title and say, okay, it's revenue, right? It's literally in the title. And it is. And I think if you probably go back in time, I'm no historian on this, but I think chief revenue officer was not like a title that was thrown around a lot in say the 80s or 90s, not like a traditional title like a CFO. But I think companies have realized over time that revenue, sales doesn't just happen, right? And it takes someone at the kind of leadership level thinking strategically, being in the room with the CEO and everybody to make sure you're maximizing that opportunity to kind of realize the full potential of your product. So yeah, it's an important and fun job for sure.
Yeah. Okay, great. And just continuing on with you then, Dan, like how did you get into the position of CRO? I'd love to know that journey
Yeah.
through your career. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of people, I certainly didn't at 22 say I'm going to be a CRO or lead a sales team or anything like that. I worked in some sort of kind of biz dev sales type roles in my early career. Even sitting in a room and cold calling companies, asking them if they're interested in, CRM solutions when I was 23 doing, outsourced inside sales. And that is a job in rejection that taught me a lot very quickly. But I went to business school, came out of that, landed at Microsoft and into a kind of biz dev and strategy role. And so, there's different paths to everything, right? Mine kind of came up through business development. So that job and some of my first startup jobs were really around partnerships and getting people to integrate software where not necessarily revenue was on the line, but kind of complex deals and deep partnerships and that kind of thing. So I kind of cut my teeth on those types of opportunities, which was really fun. And then also kind of worked into the sales side of things in different roles. And yeah, so I think my kind of experience in deal making and fostering real partnerships over time, which is a kind of a more of a human thing, right? Really like working closely with people and working towards common goals was a big part of what brought me there. And then kind of a natural just ability to work with teams and help people grow in their careers kind of got me that management leadership part of it. So yeah, for me, it kind of came from the business development partnership side versus say, I think a lot of people end up in more traditional sales roles. Like in a way, I've never been an account executive. So I guess I'm a bit rare maybe for someone who's running a team of account executives.
Thanks. And how about you, Paul? And it's something similar or quite different?
A little bit similar. I think Dan and I have actually worked at similar companies in the past, but I study mathematics at university, so I have kind of a data-driven mindset. Performance metrics, measurable outcomes is what's kind of driven me throughout my career. So I got into ad tech pretty early, 2002. And spent a bunch of time on the desktop advertising world. And really what got me excited was building marketplaces, connecting buyers and sellers. It was very messy at that time. There wasn't a lot of automation. It was a very manual work, but the world of marketplaces and selling marketplaces is kind of what got me excited. I love the performance mindset that was driven by those marketplaces, kind of the competition, the measurable outcomes, aligning incentives. So I spent the first kind of 10 years of my career building desktop advertising marketplaces, and then got introduced into gaming in the 2010s, very early into mobile. And I think layered on top of those marketplaces was this very innovative, fast moving, scaling world of mobile games, basically. And so, that really attracted me, and I went very early on that. I'm learning a lot of things in the gaming world that kind of come from desktop and console, and now was being applied to mobile, but really with a performance mindset. Everything in mobile is performance driven. And I think that's, I've stayed in mobile for the last 16 years and kind of ascended in sales, BD roles during those times because of building those marketplaces with performance mindset in a market that is just so fast moving and innovative. So yeah, I've considered leaving kind of the gaming space for on and off, but there's never another space that looks as attractive in terms of how quickly it moves, how it innovates. Last few years been tough, but yeah, even this most recent role at Appcharge, kept coming back to it because of the innovation that's available in the space.
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah.
I've had that thought at times, like, oh, maybe I should explore other industries, and have taken a minute or two to do that at times. And anyone at my company would tell you probably the worst gamer at the company. I'm like gaming. I'm not the gaming is not my passion from a consumer like it is a lot of people in the industry. And so I'm not like completely married to the industry from a interest perspective, but boy, am I married to it from a professional perspective. It is such a fun industry, not just because the topic is fun, but the people are passionate. There's a lot of energy and momentum, and it's always growing, which means there's always opportunities. There's always cool new jobs. There's always new tech. It's always just forward moving. And so when I look back at industries I've worked at in the past, or friends in other spaces, or people who've left games and come back, they're like, oh no, stay here. This is way more fun.
Yeah.
It's a great spot.
I mean, I'm with you. Yeah. The games industry is the best. So yeah,
Yeah.
we all might be a little bit biased, but
Yeah.
but yeah,
Lucky
definitely.
and biased.
Yeah. There's yeah. Thanks for that overview, Paul. Just gonna say, so the common thing with you and Dan right now, it seems like you'd both come up through business development. I know, Paul, you're saying like touch on account management as well, but ultimately like sales and business development seems to be the really big chunk of your earlier careers. And also you're both in the world of B2B tech at the moment. So I guess the question is that if you were to find a CRO at a gaming company, is it most likely going to be B2B? And again, are they most likely going to have come from sales and business development? Is there ever a case where there could be a CRO at, like, say, a game studio, or could there be a CRO that comes from any other discipline um, other than sales, business development, or account management?
Yeah, I can take that one. I think so we're in B2B, right? And gaming, if you're in a gaming company, they're B2C companies. So in the CRO role, what are you actually owning? And for Dan and I, it's clear it's kind of the revenue that we're generating from sales to other companies. For a CRO in a gaming company, and they do exist, I guess the question is, what are you owning? If you're owning the revenue, then what is your team doing on a day-to-day basis would be kind of the question. Mine and Dan's team goes out and sells to other game developers to help them be successful. If you're in a gaming company, the CRO can be in charge of kind of monetization and optimizing revenue from the players that they already have in the game, so they can own things like lifecycle management, CRM, things like that. They can own the ads team as well. That could be another piece. But then there is another function, the CMO function as well. Is kind of the growth lever for the business in terms of acquiring new users. So definitely there are CROs in gaming companies, but that role is often called something else. I would say it's not normally a CRO role. I would say even bigger companies have chief business officers, and they'll see an even broader scope of responsibility outside kind of just the monetization and the ads. And then just to address your question around what that person's profile and how they grow in that role, I would actually say it's less common that they come from maybe a sales background or a BD background like Dan and I. I think more realistically, if you want to grow in as kind of a business owner of revenue within a gaming company, you've probably built games in the past. Or I've seen some with data science, analytics backgrounds, because a lot of the work is about optimizing what you've kind of already got as a gaming company. So optimizing your player life cycle, than it is working with other gaming companies and working kind of in a B2B fashion. So yeah, that's how I would answer your question, Dan. I don't know whether you have any thoughts.
I think you covered it well.
Well then, Dan, I'll throw it to you that so Paul was just saying about almost hinting at the timing. Almost say there's a timing to bring a CRO in that you've got to. Paul, you were just saying that you are perfecting and optimizing what is already there, so there has to be something there already, right? So is there sort of a perfect stage in which companies would typically start to bring in a CRO? If so, what stage is that? And how do you think the role changes then from small, medium to large companies?
Yeah, great question. So just for background, my experience, I've done. I think this is now the fourth company I've worked at where I've joined the company in that 25, 30 people range, where kind of got a product, we know what we're doing. Now it's time to like really go and scale it. And then I've done one super early stage startup where I joined I joined the co-founders after they had started the company as the first person to come in. And so what I've seen, my experience has been that like there isn't typically a CRO in that super early stage. The CEO is often the CRO because no one's going to sell the company better than them at that point, and you're looking for those first early stage partnerships. Like the last company I was with, a company called Loot Cakes, our CEO's the first amazing thing he did from a kind of business development perspective was get a deal done with Scopely that really set us up to get the company moving, and that opened up lots of other opportunities. And then I came in as essentially the CRO and a bunch of other things because you're wearing so many hats in an early stage startup, but I didn't have that title. So I think then once you get to the point where you have a product, especially if you've taken venture money and you've maybe got some runway, and so like top line revenue and profitability isn't the most important thing in the company at that early stage. It's developing the right product and figuring out what you're doing and if it's going to work, how to price it and all that kind of stuff. Once you've kind of got that figured out and you're trying to kind of start really running with it, that's a time where you want some sales leadership. And maybe that doesn't mean it's a CRO, but you probably want to bring in a senior person who can think about this 100% of the time, an experienced seller or kind of startup executive type person. I think for an early stage company, hiring like a junior salesperson, isn't going to get you those kind of like the partnerships that are going to leap the company forward, right? Unless you've got a kind of a low price product that needs tons of volume. But a lot of times in the kind of companies that Paul and I have worked at, it's more about having big relationships with size medium and larger size publishers that kind of move the needle. So yeah, there's no perfect time for it, but I think once you get to the point where you need to accelerate revenue in a meaningful way, especially if you have taken money and then you're looking to raise another round, it's like try to go into Series A or something like that. Whether you call it a CRO or not, someone who is focused, their job is not, like a CEO can only spend maybe a third of its time on thinking about sales or whatever. So at some point you need that person thinking 100% about it.
Yeah, brilliant. Paul, anything additional to add there at all?
Yeah, I think often depends on who the founders are. Because if you have a founder who can actually talk to people, then they are often the chief salesperson for the first, for that initial phase until you kind of reach product market fit. I would say there are definitely technical founders who can't even really speak to people. And there may be the case that they want to hire someone to help them, take that initial idea to market, even before product market fit, because they can't even have the conversations that they can't tell the story they need to tell to a potential customer to actually get buy-in from there. So, but yeah, I generally agree with Dan. Once you've kind of achieved product market fit and you're ready to start scaling, that's when you should really consider a CRO, because those founder-led sales are great and they have to be the heart of the business, but they don't allow you to scale. That's one tentpole client, but to be a real business, you need a diversified client base, diversified revenue, and you need a team that allows you to do that. And that's really what a CRO allows you to do. So yeah, agree with Dan, but I do think it is dependent on who the founders are as well. I would say at Appcharge, our founders are still our chief salesperson. So for where we are in our journey, a lot of my role is supporting them and just making sure that they, they're in the right places, in the right rooms, and building the plane as we're flying is essentially what I'm doing. So there, uh, so I although I'm CRO, our CEO is our best salesperson, which is great for us. As long as they can stay attached and we are still scaling, that's a nice place to be in. But it's unrealistic for the CEO to be the chief salesperson forever.
Yeah, fair.
I'm also lucky in that our company is led by a guy, Adam Lieb, who is a terrific salesperson, and I often call him our CEO AE, our chief account executive, essentially.
Yeah, love that. But like, have either of you, and if you've not had experience, like being a CRO at a even larger company, like you've both given some examples there of like startup, small, medium size, and how that role evolves. I guess the final piece would be, when you're a larger company, let's say 500 plus or even 1,000 plus, like how does that role evolve then? Like what gets left behind and what new skills need to be developed?
Yeah, I think I don't have personal experience with that. I've mostly worked in companies in this kind of like 30 to 100 person range, but having talked to other people who are in those situations, my understanding is, and I could see how it easily becomes this, is you're dealing, at a 500 person company as a CRO, you're dealing less with like personal one-on-ones with your sales people, and getting involved in the nitty-gritty of deals, and you're much more thinking about how do I run an army, right? What are the logistics? How do I make sure we're flanking over here? Because you're going to have a large sales team that's going to have people you barely met them before, kind of thing. And so it becomes very like RevOps focused, process driven, and tools oriented, right? Now, interestingly, in our space, there is, especially now that I've moved back into the PC console world, games is a little bit weird in that we kind of have a finite number of publishers that spend a relatively sizable amount of money on things like marketing or whatnot, right? So there's not a lot of these companies that have like huge B2B games tech type or ad tech companies that have like armies of salespeople and just like, like just machines. Whereas if you go, like say, for instance, my brother is the CEO of a company that makes legal software. Their TAM is infinite. Any company with a lawyer they could sell to. That is the whole world, right? So they can scale in this kind of very process-driven, RevOps-driven formulaic almost way of doing business. And that is that is a skill that maybe one day I'd like to explore, but I've never done that, and it's intimidating in some ways. In other ways, it's kind of exciting and interesting. The thing I think I wouldn't like about it as much as like one of my favorite parts of this job at this scale is I get to be involved in a lot of the big deals and drive some of them, and even do some, player coach, in a way. And I get to know my team really well, and I know their idiosyncrasies and where I need to step in and help, or where I can let someone just run. So I think you move away from that and you turn into, the driver of a large airplane. Yeah.
Nice. A legionnaire.
Yeah.
Almost. Yeah, Paul, anything to add on that? It's like, I guess, larger company CRO experience.
Yeah, I haven't been a CRO as a VP at Unity pre-IPO, overseeing part of the ads team, reporting to the CEO at that time of Unity. So yeah, I mean, it's exactly as Dan said. It's about building and scaling a team to execute across regions, and really, it really is just building that machine that can repeatedly win and expand business. Where that opportunity lies. So again, yeah, bringing RevOps, getting good at forecasting, optimizing any pricing that needs to be optimized. But yeah, it really is taking that initial success that you had at maybe a series A and B and turning it into a machine where it just becomes highly predictable. And as Dan said, then there is no individual heroics. You're not working on any single person. There's no risk if, hey, this person leaves the business, everything's going to fall apart. You need to build a machine where you're de-risked across regions, across people, across products. That's really the role from there. So that's really what you're spending your time doing. So yeah, whereas now I spend a lot of time with kind of the AEs. At that point, I would only really ever interact with my leads. That tends to be how you change your focus as you scale up, because the individual cases are far more de-risk than they are in earlier stage businesses.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was intrigued, Paul. Like, I think there's going to be a lot of people listening to this episode that are either founders running startups, or there also will be talent folks, recruiters, HR, etc. All of which would be interested in knowing how to hire a CRO and what to look for. So not going to ask you to like the full process of how that happens, but in your mind, if someone was to hire a CRO, what do you think are some of the key things to look out for? Let's say green flags and also red flags in your experience. So yeah, I'll throw it to you, Paul, for a first answer on that.
Yeah, I think primarily you want someone ideally you want someone who's done this before. So someone who's actually built that machine and has been through that process. That's ideally what you want. Especially, as we were talking about, if you're a founder who can't, who maybe you're a first time founder and can't give the direction or the mentorship that a CRO needs. I mean, you can get that externally, but ideally they've done it before and they know what to do, and they've not just been, say, a salesperson and now they're kind of promoted. So ideally I'd say, look, the CRO is someone who's been through this before, and you hire someone who's built some of that muscle. Going back to a point I raised earlier, one of the key things for me as a CRO coming into a company is what as I said, can they say no? Can this person say no? Can they say no to you as a founder? Can they say no to their team? So one of the most important things I think in terms of saying no to a founder is when a founder says, "Hey, should we do this new cool thing that I think is amazing?" And one of my bugbears is kicking out projects that don't have business cases because someone thinks it's a cool idea. That's just one example, but saying no to the team. No, we're not going to do this deal. It's a bad deal. I've seen this happen before. This never goes well. We shouldn't set up the deal like this. It's not going to be successful. So I think making sure that you have someone who is prepared to push back and say no to both you as a founder or the team is key, because a lot of the CRO role is really an internal role. I'd say ideally it's mostly an internal role. It really isn't an external role. You want a CRO to hire a great team who can take your solutions to market and work with you, the founders, and not really necessarily be your chief salesperson. So I think that'd probably be the two green flags that I mostly care about. Red flags, I mean, I guess the the opposite, right? People who haven't done it before, I would be very wary of those. If you haven't done it before, I mean, everyone deserves a first chance, but it it depends how experienced the CEO,
And
CFO are. Because you can just spend a lot of time coaching someone if they haven't done this before.
just to jump in there, and when you say done this before, could they, without having the actual job title of CRO, that they could have had a variety of other job titles, but ultimately, when you say done this, you mean built that team, built that like revenue generating machine within a
Exactly.
company. Yeah, okay.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it could have been VP revenue, might be another title that they've had before. It might not be CRO, but been through the process of either pre or post product market fit, started building the engine that actually scales the business. So ideally, you work with someone who's been through that process before, and it's not their first time, because it's likely a lot of things during that process will be new to them. And ideally, you're hiring someone who has some experience, not just a skill set, I would say, at this level,
Yeah,
Yeah.
Dan, is it? Yeah,
Yeah,
any
I'll
green
jump in.
flags, red flags?
Yeah, so I'd say that the thing that you still see, even though everyone kind of knows that this is a problem, is, whoever your best salesperson is, or the first person that came in, isn't necessarily the right person to take this kind of CRO or similar role, especially as you're trying to scale. Uh, Salespeople come in lots of varieties. Some are complete dogs, right? They're just like out there every day crushing stuff. Some are very like kind of thoughtful, consultative, people, if you will. There's all types of folks. But just because you're good at sales, just because you've driven great numbers, doesn't mean you should be running a sales team. And this mistake still gets made. I've seen it firsthand. Uh, you want someone in this role who can think strategically, horizontally, who can work with a CFO on forecasting and be good at analysis, who can come up with a comp plan, who can think about overseas markets, right? And go meet and find the right people to help you figure out how to attack that. These are strategic, high level things. It's not the same as closing a deal. And so that's kind of number one thing to kind of work against the bias of someone who's just brought in great numbers. In all the sales and biz dev roles I've ever had where I was a part of a team, I've never been the top guy. I'm not the best salesperson. There's no question. But in all those teams, I've always been one of, if not, the best people at, working with other people, thinking strategically, doing analysis. I have a background, my pre-games life, I worked in kind of strategy consulting. So I got really good at Excel, and building plans and 3-year strategies and stuff like that. And I leverage that stuff all the time. And I think when I'm working with our CEO and CFO, when I can be at that level and do analysis with them and redline legal documents with them and whatever it is, that kind of executive level stuff, that's when I'm kind of stepping beyond what a typical person who's just worked in sales has done. And you want someone like that that can sit at the table and have those really kind of high level conversations that can help move the business forward and not just go out and sell whatever was put in front of them.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks for that. It's plenty of color in those conversations. I was just thinking though that you both have been in the games industry for a while. But is there an argument to say that if you've been a CRO in B2B tech, then you can build that revenue machine in any B2B SaaS company? Is that a fair argument, or is actually you having an entrenched understanding of the games industry in this sense? I say in this sense, as in like, does industry knowledge give you a major advantage, or not particularly? I'd imagine it would give you a lot of advantage in sales. You bring a network in, but both of you are saying like the CRO doesn't necessarily have to be the chief salesperson. They know how to build sales teams. So yeah, does it give you an advantage or not? And should you look for it when you're hiring one as well?
Right. Yeah, it's a great question. I think games is a very specific kind of unique place. I mean, it sits in the entertainment industry, but it's a whole nother world from movies or television or toys or whatever. So um, if you're looking to bring in a CRO into a gaming company that's never worked in games, that's going to be a bit of a disadvantage because because there's this finite market of top publishers that drives so much of the revenue, not having any network or any understanding of how those companies work is something you're going to have to overcome. Whereas if you live in the world of, say, SaaS software for enterprise companies, and you've been selling a CRM tool to Fortune 500 companies, you move over to legal software or accounting software or something like that. That's a little bit of an easier move because you got the same kind of customers. Maybe you're selling into a different org, but it's the same process. Um, I think someone coming out of games and going into a different industry is probably better than the reverse because of the specificity of the games industry. But also, I think scale matters or kind of stage matters. Like, so I wouldn't that confidently go out to a larger non-game company and be like, I'm the best CRO for you, you know. Whereas I confidently do that within games. Because my experiences are so specific and my network is what it is, and so a lot of the value I brought is my network and my experience and my ability to price in this market and understand exactly how publishers are structured and all that kind of stuff. So I'd say there's a little less transferability than maybe other industries, would be my conclusion.
Cool. Paul, yeah, what do you think about that? Any advantages there?
I think Dan hit on some good points. I think again, back to the kind of stage of company, if it's early stage pre-product market fit, you really need to be getting fast signal back from the market on what's working and what's not. And the CRO with the right network, as Dan said, can get you that quickly. They can get you in the right rooms and get honest feedback on what's working faster than someone who doesn't necessarily have that network. I also think kind of one of the key things a CRO needs to lead the company on is really understanding how the customer buys, why they're buying, why they're not buying, who influences the decision, and really aligning internally on how long this deal cycle should take. And I think if you haven't had experience doing that, you're not going to be aligned internally, and the CEO, CFO are going to be frustrated because maybe deals aren't coming in as quickly as they can. So I think that level of experience is key in just managing expectations around who we should be speaking to, why they should be buying from us, how long this deal is going to take. It is pretty key. And if you're not listening to your CRO on those points, I think you're doing yourself a disservice as a CEO founder, because I think that's one of the key insights that you should be bringing in. As we've discussed, they are not necessarily your chief salesperson. So you really need to lean on the experience that they have of doing this before in market, knowing where the opportunity lies, who buys, why they buy, and kind of alignment on how long that might take. I think is key.
Yeah. Okay. Great. And hey, we're approaching quickly, somewhat towards the end of the episode. So I was wondering, I bet there's going to be people listening to this that are aspiring to be CROs at some point in their career, or perhaps it's like the next step they're looking to take, upwards. So would there be any advice that you would give to someone who feels like that's their career ambition or perhaps a next step? And I'll throw it out to either of you to jump in on that one.
I can go first. One of the key things that I think is key, and I think this is key for all executives, is to learn how to write. Because especially in a scaling company, a global scaling company, we're using, instant messaging, we're using Slack, Appcharge lives on WhatsApp. You can't communicate everything you want in a meeting. You need to be able to learn to write and put your ideas down and communicate them well through writing. That, if it doesn't, in my opinion, if it doesn't exist in text, it doesn't really exist. Like, because something you said 2 months ago that just doesn't, people forget it. And so learning to write and build a coherent narrative that people uh, coalesce around is pretty key for me. And AI is great for this. It can help you clear your thinking. Just one caveat here, I wouldn't only use AI to do that. But I do think making sure you are coherently making a point and learning to write your ideas out and making sure that they are well understood by your team is pretty key. The other thing that I think is pretty key is just, the CRO is a very data measurement focused role. You need to be on the numbers all day, every day. And I think that's pretty key. And building your kind of success measurement data spine early is just key. That has to be kind of central to what you do every day. And if you don't have that, probably being a CRO is not the right role for you. But having data uh, and driving towards defined success criteria is kind of key. And again, if you're not doing that, if that's not for you, then it's probably not the right role. There'd be two key points that I would give there.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that. I think it's maybe not the expected answer that these key things are like writing and data, right, for a sales job kind of thing. But yeah, I think all the time about how fortunate I am to have had that background where I just got immersed in Excel and analysis and that plays a role so often for me. Anytime something gets complicated, an AE brings me a pricing problem, or we're trying to figure out how what's the market opportunity in Korea or whatever it is. My ability to dive into the numbers and move them around and think hard and write some formulas and that kind of thing, it really matters because if you want the hard answers to the hard questions, you need to be able to think pretty hard about them. So I would advise anyone who's kind of spent especially their time in sales, to spend time crunching numbers and not just reading dashboards, but putting things in Excel and playing around with them or Google Sheets or whatever, and get comfortable with analysis. Uh, that stuff is always going to be important for this kind of role. The other thing I would think on the more the softer skill side is like uh, making sure you're listening. And I think for me, kind of my soft skills superpower has been empathy and collaboration, right? So, or it has allowed me to be a good collaborative partner, because once you get into this kind of CRO level, working with the other teams around the org is really important, right? Like if you're part of a leadership team and you're not getting along with, and you're not building and collaborating well with the other teams, then you're going to have a really conflictual, like difficult time in the company, because there's always going to be some conflict or whatever between teams, but you've got to be the one managing that and making sure it's productive, pushing back where you need to also. And so it's really, there's a people skills element to it that's not just oh, sell, hit the number, whatever. No, it's about like collaboration and listening, and that's true when you're working with your team, but it's also true as a lateral thing. That one of the things I could never stand coming up in my life has been kind of sales leaders and managers who are kind of do the thing where they're just like staring at the number, being like, "Hit this number, guys. We're not. How do we hit this number before the month ends or whatever it is, right?" And I've just always found that to be super counterproductive. I'm way more interested in spending time with my team and my partners around the company, listening and learning and doing and enacting strategies, and knowing that if we execute on those things well, those numbers will fall into place, right? Staring at a number and yelling at it and telling people to go jump higher doesn't really get you anywhere long term. We use a kind of a motto at GameSite, think in years, which is really applicable in lots of places, but particularly for me, it means a lot, because it means I don't have to sit there and yell at the guys about this quarter's numbers. I'm trying to figure out how do we make sure we're amazing 2 years from now, and that this relationship we're working on is bearing fruit a year from now, not this quarter. So anyway, so two wildly different things here. Get good at data, but also, hone your empathy skills so that you can work well with other teams and think long term.
Brilliant. I love that. And also when you were saying hit that number, flashbacks to the boiler room recruitment agencies where I
Right.
started my my career, trying to just constantly be the top of the
Totally,
billing,
I'm sure.
the
Yeah.
billing leaderboards. Yeah. Good times. Hey, Dan and Paul, thank you so much. I have a last question that I ask everybody that comes on the Talent Game podcast. Considering that I love talking about talent related topics, and that is, what is your favorite interview question? Especially as you've talked a lot today about building revenue generating teams quite a lot. So naturally, I'd imagine you've both done your fair share of interviewing and hiring. So yeah, do you have a favorite interview question you can share?
Sure,
Yep.
I'll go ahead. So I wish I could remember who gave me this one. I'd like to credit them with it. Not mine, not my idea, but I do love this one, which is at the end of an interview, I will ask someone, "Hey, look, no one's perfect, right? If I'm gonna probably go talk to people who know you. We're gonna back channel references. You're gonna send me references. When I ask them, hey, Johnny's, no one's a 10 out of 10 on everything, right? What's one spot where Johnny's not a 10, and maybe how can I help him get closer to that number, even if it's not never going to be a natural strength for that person, right? What's the chink in the armor? And it's interesting because it's just another way of saying, like, what are your strengths and weaknesses? But it's just different enough that it gets people kind of disarmed a little bit, and you get some really interesting answers. Some of them are hand wavy, stuff, but other times someone will say something that disqualifies them from the job. Other times you will get kind of that more human side of someone where they're opening up a little bit, and they'll tell you, like, like if you asked me that question, I would tell you, I hate doing math in front of people. I will never go to a whiteboard and, like, I'm not great in a room with tons of people staring at me saying, go figure this thing out real quick and come up with your best idea. I'm like, I want time. I need time to do analysis, and then I'll come and present it to you. I'll be very confident. Right. But whatever it is, whatever your chink is, it gives people a chance to potentially disqualify themselves, which is useful, but also B, like, you learn, like, okay, this is an area where I could help them, or I could be aware when they come in that this is going to be a thing, and it could be something big or something small. One thing related to this is, like, I've hired enough people, and no one, 50% of the people you hire aren't going to work out for one reason or another. And in the 50% that do, there's going to be some part of them that they're not quite what you thought they were. Hopefully there's some things that are even better than that. But, like, inevitably, I always have this conversation with, like, our like, just people around the company. Like, once someone's started and is a few months in, and we figure out what their thing is that it's not great or whatever, we go, oh, it turns out they're human also, right? It's like, we figured out that they're human just like everyone else we've ever hired. They're not perfect, and that's the area we're going to help them get better at, or whatever. So if anything you can do to kind of preview that and get ahead of it is an advantage. So anyway, that's my
No, I love that. It's a chance to, the best interview questions always get to the heart of are there to get to the heart of people, and tear down that facade of an interview. But yeah, you're right. Like, no one's perfect, and the interview process is just a data gathering exercise so that you can get the best out of them when they start as well. So,
Totally.
yeah, Paul, what's yours?
Yeah. I think mine would be, what do you believe about your role or your industry that most smart or informed people would disagree with? Um, a couple of reasons why I think it's, as you build a team, I think it's really, so we talked about kind of cross-functional collaboration. I think that's important, but I really want to have respectful contrarians in my org. So people who have evidence-based reasoning for why they believe, and they're prepared to say it, because otherwise we all just agree and we all do the same thing. So going back to my point, we all just start doing a thing, even though we shouldn't be doing a thing, which defocuses us. So for me, one of the key things is, as I think about how we build a team, is someone who can think contrarily. So they do have opposing opinions, and they're willing to verbalize those, and they have evidence-based reasons for why those opinions exist. Because yeah, as I said, for me, that's key. And as we're making decisions internally, that there are people like that who are questioning why should we do something, or why shouldn't we do this thing. So that for me is pretty key.
I think that's a great question that reflects the culture that you're trying to build as well, right? You're very
Definitely.
purposely
Yeah.
trying to find.
I don't want yes people, but I also want them to have good reasons for why they're saying no, and to do that respectfully.
Yeah, brilliant. I haven't actually heard that one before.
Yeah.
Dan, I was also thinking it reminds me of your question was quite similar to one that Simon Sinek has proposed previously. I almost like a riff on like what would your previous colleagues or managers say about you. But
Okay.
either way, I like both those questions, because I think if you were asked one as a candidate, you suddenly stop and pause and actually have to think, and all of those pre-scripted answers that you have in your brain have to leave and go out the window for a second, so you can actually.
It's always the question that gets the longest pause before it's answered.
I think as we talked about, also the nice thing about the games industry is, although it's a huge industry, it's also small. And so you can ask them that question, and it's also highly likely, as Dan said, that you can back channel to someone to actually get the real answer as well. So, and in our industry, the interviewees they kind of know that as well. So that really does force them to be honest in that answer, because they probably know that you know someone that has worked with them previously, and so it forces
incredibly
honesty.
rare that I was saying it's incredibly rare that I hire someone that I'm not connected to in some way, that I can't find someone I know or someone I work with who knows someone who worked with them, that pressure is real.
Going back to our point about the industry advantage as well, like, considering the games industry is twice the size of music and film combined, we were talking about Pocket Gamer in London before we hit record, and like whenever I go there, I just have to kind of like walk around the event space, and I will bump into multiple people that I know. And so, yeah, it's which is a gift and a curse, because obviously if you build an exceptional reputation, your career and your opportunities will snowball and be offered to you, and vice versa. If you start damaging your own career and companies and teams that you touch, then unfortunately you'll probably find, if you keep doing that repeatedly, you'll have to find a new industry to move into. So it can definitely use it to your advantage, which is fantastic. But hey, we have hit time. So thank you so much, Dan and Paul. I feel like anyone listening to this will have a really solid idea of what is a CRO, how to become one, how to hire one. So yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to give your insight. So thanks so much.
Yeah, it was fun.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having us.
Thanks. See you soon. Bye-bye.